This starts as advice to men, but it turns into something much bigger about fear, shame, and accountability.
Of them, or I'm impressed with them. When I was their age, I had this weird sense of masculinity that if I said, oh, dude, look how handsome this dude is, that it took away from my prestige somehow. That I couldn't tell people they were impressive. I couldn't tell a woman, God, I'm just crazy about you. And I would give anything to spend more time with you because I was worried that she wouldn't return my affection and I would be just too hurt and I had to be cool and like not need her or not. All this bullshit that got in the way of me really having a good life. And what I realized is every failure I've had, people go, oh, his business went bankrupt. Okay. And then they go back to thinking about themselves. So everyone you're worried about really doesn't give a shit about you. And by the way, the dude that's not very good looking and is with a ridiculously like high character hot woman is one of two things: has rich parents, or two, is willing to endure rejection. So I just don't buy, that myth of the man risking his personal and professional reputation. I don't think that's true. On the other side, the myth I hate, I don't know if you've seen this. On TikTok, a lot of women are saying, I don't date because the risks of being unalived, which I guess is the woke version of saying murdered.
I think it's because on social media platforms, if you say murder or suicide,
it goes right down.
I don't know if it actually does, but it's this idea that, that it's going to be ranked down.
Here's the data. Okay, if 2,500 women a year are murdered by men, that's way too many. It's a huge problem. Sexual assault is a bigger problem. The majority of women who are murdered by someone they know. So the reality is a small number of women are murdered on dates with strangers. It just doesn't happen that often. And 40,000 men a year kill themselves. So if you go on a date with a man, the man is 16 times more likely to go home and hurt himself than hurt you. So what I would say to men is make the approach, take the risk, and as long as you're respectful, you're going to be fine, and so is she, and you are not taking your professional or personal reputation into your hands. And what I would say to women is if you go on a date with a guy that you met on an app, there's all sorts of digital breadcrumbs, and it's a lot, you are, and I can statistically prove this, the ride over in Uber, the Uber was a lot more dangerous than the date itself, and you are more likely to die of choking during dinner than to be hurt by that man. So what I hate is that there's all this inflammatory content being boosted on online media that's getting in the way of the most rewarding thing in life. And that is to find someone who you are physically attracted to, who you sync up with spiritually, and you decide to build a life together. And not enough of that is happening. We're in a sex recession, right? And online is making it worse. The dating apps have an incentive in you finding a bigger, better deal. And the genders have done an amazing job of convincing each other it's the other's fault. And I think one of the big foci that need to be really pay more attention to is what I call renewal of alliances. I'd love to see a renewal of alliances between us and our great allies in Europe. Renewal of allies who are moderates. I know nothing about you. I just can't believe you're an extremist on the left or the right. I just don't.
Bullseye.
There needs to be a renewal of alliances between what I'll call moderate lefties like me and moderate conservatives that are everywhere. We're all Americans, but the most important alliance that needs renewal is the greatest alliance in history, hands down, and it's the alliance between men and women. The integration of female and male energy, the ability to find someone you want to procreate with, to build something together, that is the most rewarding thing in life, and I can prove it's key to the species' progress and existence. And men and women have been taught not to trust each other and to blame each other. I hate the fucking manosphere, and I hate quite frankly, some of the reactionary notion on the left where it's misandry cosplaying as social commentary. There's a lot of bullshit misandry online where you're assuming every young man is a predator, and quite frankly, that every billionaire is evil or that every white person is racist. But the alliance between men and women needs to be reformed. It's the greatest alliance in history. And online, it's teaching men to blame women for their problems. No, women's ascent saved our ass. Women in the factory in World War II is the reason we won the war in 4 years, not in 7. Women going into the workforce in the 70s and 80s and protections of their rights for fair pay is the reason we're not a second-tier power to China right now. If women hadn't ascended, we'd be really squarely and duly fucked, right? And their ascent is in no way inversely correlated or correlated to men's descent. Men have to stop that bullshit. An immigrant didn't take your job. He made it such that you could have lower rent, a meal for a reasonable price, and have someone take care of your mother when she's older. And at the same time, if you're having romantic problems, it's not her fault. Women are ascending, and naturally, they have higher standards because they're no longer economically dependent upon men, which should be a motivator for men to level up, not to start blaming women. And all this shit is being totally inflamed and taken totally out of proportion by online because it creates more attention, it's interesting, it's novel, and it creates more Nissan ads. But I'm trying to figure out what is the economic incentive to try and figure out a way to get more men and women appreciating the other gender beyond just the basics, right? How do we renew that alliance?
I love that statement. I saw somewhere, of all places, on X, every once in a while you encounter something that really sticks with you. Every once in a while there's a gem that just falls through, really makes you think. And I don't know who this person was. Might have been an account with one follower. And it landed in front of me and it said, the way you destroy a society is to get the men and women to hate each other. 100%. And as a biologist, first and foremost, I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. Right? If you want to eradicate a population of any species, you get the males and the females to start hating each other. Not just because they don't mate, but because you throw off the mating dynamics in a way that then can create infighting among the males. We see that too, infighting among the women. Although, I don't know, I think that there's a lot to explore around this sort of what the standard is that we're holding the opposite sex to. It's an interesting question. I can't say I've really evolved my thinking around this enough to maybe dive into it, but I know you thought about this. I think a lot of males hide behind this notion that they have to be everything. They have to be tall. They have to be rich. They have to be jacked. They have to be kind. They have to be, hopefully everyone's kind, but you know what I mean? That they can't say the wrong thing even once, so they're hiding behind that. And if they go out and look, they'll get plenty of evidence for that, right? No men, no protectors, no this. Actually, I did something I rarely do. Which is I brought my phone into this because right before I came in here, a woman that I've known for 20 years wrote and asked me if I would ask you a question.
Wow.
No, and it's directly related to this. So I'm going to do this. Of course, I'm not going to say who this person is. And she said, because I mentioned that I'm speaking to you today, and she said, please tell Scott that I'd personally like to thank him for his efforts encouraging men to embrace their duties as protectors, providers, and generally just being accountable. Because we have a serious shortage among hetero dudes, she lives in San Francisco, particularly in the Bay Area. And I said, will do, but can you tell me what you mean by accountable? Serious question, I want to make sure I'm specific. She said, when I say accountability, I'm referring to the fact that many times in romantic relationships, men seem to want to avoid feelings of shame and guilt to such a degree that they often respond to them.
That is the question underneath the whole clip. How much of what we call confidence is really just the courage to be honest? Leave your take in the comments and like and subscribe for more clips like this.